The baby's healthy. But what appeared on that monitor told a different story. My name's Joe, 37, Marine. Just returned from Kandahar 2 weeks ago after an 8-month deployment. I was in that cold, sterile exam room in Phoenix watching my wife, Melissa, get her ultrasound when Dr. Bradley Richardson's hand began to tremble, like he'd just seen something impossible. Sir, you need to step outside and contact a lawyer. The words landed like shrapnel. Melissa was stretched out on the table, gel still slick on her stomach, her eyes darting between me and the doctor, confusion written all over her face. It was the same look she'd been giving me often lately, as though she was constantly trying to read my thoughts. Is something wrong with the baby? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Years of military discipline trains you for this. Remain calm even when everything's collapsing. Dr. Richardson swiped sweat off his forehead. 20 years in medicine, certificates on the wall proved it, yet his face had gone pale. He couldn't stop looking at the screen, like it was showing him state secrets. The baby's fine, he said again, lowering his voice as he leaned toward me. But what I'm seeing here shows 32 weeks of development. The hum of medical machines filled the silence. Melissa kept smiling, pretending nothing was unusual. She'd been doing a lot of that since I came home. Pretending. 32 weeks, I repeated. Yes, sir. The math lined itself up in my head, instantly. 32 weeks ago, I was loading gear onto a transport headed for Afghanistan. 32 weeks ago, I was kissing my wife goodbye at Sky Harbor Airport. 32 weeks ago, I was sleeping in a barracks tent halfway across the globe. The doctor looked at me, waiting for anger, for an outburst, for something. But I stayed still, processing it like mission intel. Joe. Melissa's voice was small. What's happening? Why do you both look so serious? I turned and studied her carefully. The constant phone checking since I'd come home. Her cheerful talk about the pregnancy, like it was some surprise blessing. The way she'd insisted on scheduling this appointment when I could be present. She wanted me here for this reveal. The realization settled inside me, heavy and cold. I met Melissa 6 years ago at a barbecue in Tempe. She was a dental hygienist, had a laugh that filled an entire room. Back then, I was stationed at Luke Air Force Base before moving to Camp Pendleton. She'd said she always dreamed of marrying a military man, respected the sacrifice. We tied the knot 3 years later in her parents' church. Simple. Small. I deployed twice during our marriage, short tours. She seemed to handle it well. Sent letters, care packages, managed the house. The kind of wife other Marines envied. When this Kandahar deployment came up 8 months back, she cried at the airport. Real tears, not fake ones. Hugged me like she never wanted to let go. I'll stay busy, she promised. Maybe take classes, fix up the garden. I remember thinking how lucky I was. The first month overseas, we video called every few days. She looked exhausted, but that was normal. The second month, our calls got shorter. She said she was taking evening pottery classes at the community college. By the third month, I was mostly getting brief texts. Busy day at work. Miss you. Everything's fine. That's military life. Wives learn to survive on their own. When I returned 2 weeks ago, she felt different. Nervous. She'd gained weight, blamed stress eating. Wore baggy clothes. Said she wasn't feeling well. Maybe a stomach bug. Then last week, she announced she was pregnant. I found out right after you left, she said, crying happy tears. I wanted to surprise you when you came home. I'm about 10 weeks along. 10 weeks. I'd barely been home for a week and a half at that point, and she already had the ultrasound lined up. She wanted me there. For our baby. I felt proud then. Excited. Believed maybe all the sacrifice had been worth it. Coming home to this. But now I sat in a doctor's office, realizing the math was impossible. The timeline was broken. Dr. Richardson lingered, waiting for my reaction. Melissa kept pressing with questions, her voice climbing. Something inside me cracked, but on the surface I stayed calm. Training takes over. 32 weeks, I repeated quietly. The doctor nodded. His hand steadied, though his eyes darted to the door, like he wanted to escape. Sir, I need to ask, were you present at the time of conception? Melissa's face drained of color. Not puzzled, caught. Joe, I don't understand, she stammered, but her tone had shifted. Less confusion, more panic. What does 32 weeks mean? I stood slowly, posture straight, shoulders squared. It means I was in Afghanistan when this child was conceived. The silence was total. Even the machine seemed to go quiet. That's not possible, Melissa whispered. But her eyes weren't on me anymore. She stared at the ceiling tiles, hands trembling. I told you I'm 10 weeks pregnant. I got pregnant right before you left. Dr. Richardson cleared his throat. Ma'am, the measurements are precise. This is a 32-week pregnancy. Conception would have been approximately 8 months ago. I watched the truth hit her. The story she'd carefully constructed was unraveling in real time. Somewhere, she'd miscalculated. Maybe forgot the timeline. Maybe got too comfortable with her lie. There has to be a mistake, she said, sitting up, the exam table paper crinkling beneath her. The machine, or something. But I was already thinking of other things. The neighbor, Trevor Williams, the one helping with the yard while I was away. Melissa had mentioned him in a few calls. Said he fixed the fence, helped move furniture. Good neighbor. I thought of the shorter calls, the late-night pottery classes, her insistence on this ultrasound appointment. She wanted me here, wanted me to believe this was mine, wanted me to commit to raising another man's child. The weight in my chest grew heavier. Not rage, not yet, just a sharp, undeniable clarity, like looking through a rifle scope when everything snaps into focus. Dr. Richardson, I said, my voice firm. I'll need copies of everything. Measurements, images, the full report. Joe, what are you doing? Melissa's voice rose, edged with fear. You're scaring me. I turned toward my wife. 6 years of marriage. 3 years believing I truly knew her. 8 months sleeping alone in Afghanistan while she was sharing a bed with someone else. I'm just gathering the facts, I told her, like any mission requires. One look in her eyes told me she already knew it was over. The ride home was silent, except for Melissa's rambling. She kept talking, offering excuses that unraveled with every sentence. Maybe they mixed up the file, she said, wringing her hands. Hospitals make mistakes all the time. Remember when you got someone else's blood work results? I kept my gaze fixed on the traffic. Phoenix streets were crowded for a Tuesday afternoon. Everyday people living normal lives while mine was unraveling in the passenger seat. Or maybe the ultrasound machine wasn't calibrated right, she pressed on. Those are computers. Computers fail. We pulled into the driveway. The house looked unchanged. Desert landscaping, the red-tiled roof, the basketball hoop I'd put up 3 summers back. But everything felt foreign. I let the truck idle, the engine ticking as it cooled. Joe, say something, Melissa pleaded. You're making me nervous. I studied her, really studied her. The weight gain, the loose clothes, the way she avoided certain positions when we were intimate. It all clicked now. When's the baby due? I asked. Her mouth fell open. What? If you're 32 weeks along, when's the baby due? She hesitated, eyes darting as if calculating which answer might save her. The doctor didn't give an exact date, she finally stammered. 8 weeks, I said flatly. 32 plus 8 makes 40. You're due in 8 weeks. We got out of the truck. I opened the front door. Vanilla candles scented the air, Melissa's favorite. The smell of home. Only now it felt like a crime scene. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water, staring out the window. Trevor Williams was in his yard, tinkering with his motorcycle. Mid-40s, divorced 2 years, worked construction. The same man who'd helped Melissa move the patio furniture while I was overseas. Want me to make lunch? Melissa asked, her voice too high, too forced. How long have you been sleeping with Trevor? I said. The glass she was holding slipped and shattered against the tiles. What did you just say? I faced her. You heard me. That's insane, Joe. He's just our neighbor. He helped with a few things while you were gone. How could you accuse me of that? But her body betrayed her words. She was retreating, not standing her ground. That wasn't the stance of an innocent woman. That was someone exposed. The baby is yours, she insisted, her voice rising in desperation. I don't care what that doctor thinks. This child is yours. We'll get another opinion. Another doctor. I crouched down, picking up shards of broken glass. Jagged, clear, sharp, like the truth itself. Melissa, I said without looking up, I've been trained to gather intel, to analyze situations, to detect lies. This isn't Afghanistan, she snapped. This is our marriage. Our life. I stood, dropping the pieces into the trash. Exactly. In Afghanistan, lies usually meant someone was trying to kill you. Here, they just ruin your life. Her tears came then. Not the soft tears from our airport goodbye months ago, but raw, broken sobs. I love you, she cried. Whatever you think, I love you. I walked past her toward the bedroom. I'm packing some things. Where are you going? To find a lawyer. Joe, please. We can fix this. The baby needs a father. I paused in the doorway. The baby has a father. It just isn't me. That night, I checked into a motel near Luke Air Force Base. Nothing fancy but clean. A room like dozens I'd stayed in during training. It felt familiar. At 7 sharp, I called Stephen Parker, our lawyer from when we bought the house and wrote our wills. Former Army. A man who understood soldiers. Joe, what's going on? He asked. I laid it all out, the ultrasound, the dates, the math that couldn't lie. Jesus, he muttered. I'm sorry, brother. That's rough. I need to know my options. First, we get a DNA test. Confirm paternity or prove the opposite. Then we start documenting everything. Medical records, any messages with Melissa. Next, we prepare for divorce proceedings. And the house? I asked. Arizona's a community property state. Normally it's split evenly. But if we can prove infidelity, especially if she used marital funds during the affair, it could impact division. But we'll need evidence. When the call ended, I drove back to the house. Melissa's car was gone, probably at work, acting like nothing had happened. I unlocked the door. It was still my home, after all, and went straight to the office. Melissa kept bills and bank papers in the desk. I'd never looked before. What I found made it worse. Credit card charges at restaurants I'd never visited. Hotel bills in Scottsdale. Proof. Shopping receipts for men's clothes, all in size large. I wore a medium. Phone records stacked with hundreds of calls to Trevor Williams, starting just weeks after I left on deployment. But the hardest to stomach was a receipt from a women's clinic in Tempe dated 7 months ago. Prenatal vitamins and a pregnancy test. She had known from the very beginning. 7 months to decide what to do. And her solution was to convince me the baby was mine. I took pictures of everything on my phone. Proof. Evidence. As I slid the papers back into place, I heard a car pulling into the driveway. Melissa was home earlier than expected. I was standing in the kitchen when she walked in. Her eyes widened when she saw me. I thought you were staying somewhere else, she said. I came back for a few things. She set her purse on the counter, watching me closely. You've been digging through my things, haven't you? Should I have been? The look on her face said everything I needed. Joe, whatever you think you found, there's an explanation. I pulled out my phone and brought up a photo. A restaurant bill from 5 months ago. Dinner for 2. Charged to our joint card. Explain this. She glanced at the screen, her face drained of color. I took my sister out for her birthday. Your sister lives in Tucson. She was visiting. I swiped to the next picture, the hotel receipt from Scottsdale. And this. Silence. Another swipe, the receipt for men's clothing. And this. She dropped heavily into a chair, her shoulders sagging. The fight was gone. How long? I asked. Joe, how long have you been with Trevor? Her hands covered her face. It's not what you think. How long? Her voice was barely audible. Since about a month after you left. It wasn't planned, it just happened. 7 months, I said flatly. Almost my entire deployment. And the baby? I don't know, it could be yours. The timing, Melissa. I kept my tone steady. You know it isn't mine. She lifted her head, mascara streaking her cheeks. What are you going to do? I was already heading for the door. Stephen Parker's office was in Scottsdale, a sleek glass and steel building that screamed serious business. I've got the evidence, I said, sliding printed photos across his desk. He examined them one by one, careful and methodical. Former military knew the value of proper documentation. This is thorough, he said. credit cards, phone logs, medical records. Solid case. How are you holding up? I'm functional. He nodded, understanding. Functional was sometimes the best you could manage. Here's our plan, he said. Step 1. File for divorce based on adultery. Arizona allows fault-based divorce, and your evidence is undeniable. Step 2. We request a court-ordered DNA test to prove non-paternity. Step 3. We demand repayment of marital funds spent on the affair. And the house. With proof like this, we can argue for a larger share. Judges take misuse of marital assets seriously. How long will it drag on? That depends on her. If she's smart, she'll settle. If she resists, it could take months. I walked out of his office carrying a folder stuffed with documents and a court date set 3 weeks ahead. The divorce petition was scheduled to be delivered to Melissa at her workplace the following day. Clean, professional, no theatrics. That night, I returned home. Melissa was in the kitchen preparing dinner for 2. When she saw me step inside, her eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. I made your favorite, she said softly. Chicken and rice. I filed for divorce today. The wooden spoon slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a sharp clatter. Joe, please. Can't we talk about this? There's nothing left to talk about. The baby isn't mine. We'll run a DNA test if you want, but deep down, we both know the truth. She shut off the stove and turned to face me fully. What do you want? Do you want me to beg? Fine, I'll beg. I made a mistake. I was lonely, I was scared, and Trevor was there. I messed up badly. 7 months isn't a mistake, Melissa. 7 months is a decision. I love you. No, you don't. If you did, you wouldn't have spent 7 months sleeping with our neighbor while I was across the world in Afghanistan, getting shot at. Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. My emotions had burned out somewhere between the ultrasound appointment and the credit card bills. I was going to tell you, she whispered. When? After the baby was born. You were going to let me raise another man's child for nearly 2 decades and only admit the truth afterward. Her silence was enough of an answer. I'll be at a motel until this is over, I told her. The papers will be served tomorrow. You should get yourself a lawyer. Joe, wait, she called out as I reached the kitchen doorway. What about us? What about our marriage? I turned back for one last look. 6 years of marriage. 3 of them believing I knew who you really were. There is no us. Not since the day you chose Trevor Williams. I left her there in the kitchen, dinner cooling on the stove. Outside, Trevor was bent over his motorcycle in the driveway. When my truck engine roared to life, he glanced up. Our eyes locked for a brief second through the windshield. He was the one who broke the stare first. The courtroom was small and sterile. Judge Patricia Hernandez presiding. Melissa sat across the aisle beside her attorney, a young man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My lawyer, Stephen Parker, was prepared. Every piece of evidence was neatly organized, impossible to deny. Phone records, credit card charges, hotel receipts, an ultrasound report that proved the timeline made paternity impossible. And the DNA test results from last week. 0 chance I was the father. Your Honor, Stephen said firmly, the evidence makes it clear. The defendant engaged in a prolonged extramarital affair during my client's military deployment, used marital funds to sustain that affair, and deliberately misled my client into believing he was the father of another man's child. Melissa's attorney argued that her affair had no bearing on the division of assets, but Judge Hernandez, with 2 decades of experience on the bench, had seen far too many cases like this. The court finds the defendant's conduct to be a serious violation of the marital bond and a misuse of shared assets, she declared. The plaintiff is granted 65% of the marital estate, including the family residence. The defendant is further ordered to repay the plaintiff for all funds spent on sustaining the extramarital relationship. Melissa stared down at the desk before her. No tears this time, just resignation. In addition, the judge continued, the court rules that the defendant will bear full financial responsibility for all expenses related to the pregnancy and birth, as the child is not biologically the plaintiff's. The gavel struck. Final. Outside the courthouse, Melissa hurried after me. Joe, wait, she called. I stopped, but didn't face her. I'm sorry, she said softly. I know it doesn't make things right, but I am sorry. I finally turned my head. She was showing now, her belly rounded beneath the loose dress. In 2 months, she'd deliver a child with no husband and no father willing to claim him. Sorry doesn't give me back 8 months of my life, I answered. She only nodded, then walked away. 3 months later, I signed the last of the paperwork in Stephen's office. The house was officially mine. The bank account split exactly as the court had ordered. Melissa had left the state, moving back in with her parents in Ohio. Trevor Williams hadn't fared any better. Once word spread through the construction industry, he was quickly let go. No one in Arizona's defense-driven economy wanted a man known for sleeping with a deployed Marine's wife. His ex-wife had also uncovered the affair during their divorce proceedings, costing him more money in a revised settlement. I later heard from neighbors that he'd relocated to Tucson, trying to piece together a fresh start. I kept the house for half a year before selling it. The walls held too many memories, too much history. I bought a smaller, simpler place closer to base, clean, uncluttered, with no ghosts. I had my truck, my savings, and a hard-earned lesson about how much trust to give another person. My deployment to Kandahar had taught me how to survive in hostile territory. Coming home had taught me how to survive in another kind of battlefield. When my commanding officer offered me another overseas assignment, I declined. I wanted to stay stateside, take time to figure out my next steps. Some evenings, I'd sit on the back porch and think about the other path. The one where I had believed her lies, raised another man's child, and never uncovered the truth. That version of Joe Smith would have lived an entire life built on deception. I chose reality, no matter how harsh it was. The military had drilled into me that clear intelligence leads to sound decisions, whether in combat or at home. Melissa's betrayal collapsed because she underestimated both the certainty of simple math and a Marine's devotion to facts over fantasy. Sometimes, the most powerful response to betrayal is refusing to live inside someone else's falsehoods.